The text came while I was sitting in my office reviewing quarterly reports for the resort chain. My phone buzzed, and for a moment I thought it might be Michael. Instead, it was from Regina, my mother-in-law. Remember to pack casual clothes for the beach house this weekend. Nothing fancy. It's just family. Her words were wrapped in condescension, the kind she laced into everything she said to me. Even after all these years, it still made me smile in a bitter, almost ironic way. If only she knew. If only she understood who she was really speaking to. I am Sarah Chen. I am 34 years old, and I own the Sapphire Bay Resort Group. 17 luxury properties spread across some of the most coveted coastlines in the country. What Regina and the rest of Michael's family thought was just a beach house was in fact part of my empire. They believed I was simply Michael's wife, who worked in hospitality. A hotel clerk? A receptionist? Someone who smoothed sheets and fetched extra towels. And I let them believe it. It was easier that way, at least at first. When I met Michael at a hotel management conference 10 years ago, I was already running my first property, a struggling beachfront hotel that I had clawed back from bankruptcy and transformed into something exquisite. By then I knew what it meant to bleed for my dreams, to stay up nights fixing broken plumbing myself, to stand in empty lobbies praying for just enough guests to cover payroll. I had built my career with grit, not privilege. Michael was charming, warm, and or so I thought different from his family. He worked in marketing, had an easy laugh, and when he looked at me across that conference hall, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. He didn't know me as the owner. He knew me as Sarah. That mattered to me. When his family later assumed I worked the front desk of a resort, I didn't correct them. I thought, let them know me for who I am, not what I own. I thought that was noble, maybe even romantic. And for a while it worked. But Regina always needed to control the stage. Every year she organized the family beach vacation. It was her ritual of dominance, a way of reminding everyone that she was the matriarch, that she had the power to summon the family into luxury. She would rent out the most expensive house on the Sapphire Bay property, my flagship resort, the jewel of my empire. For 5 years I let her play her game, smiling quietly, as she bragged about treating the family to experiences she didn't realize I owned. The irony never failed to amuse me. She paraded her wealth while writing checks made out to me. But this year was different. 2 months earlier, at a family dinner, I had overheard Regina and Amanda, my sister-in-law, whispering in the kitchen. I was walking past when I caught Regina's voice. It's time Michael traded up. Jessica from his office would be perfect. Her father owns half of downtown. Sarah's sweet, but she's just not our caliber. Their words sliced through me like glass. I froze in the hallway unseen, my hand tightening around the resort keycard in my pocket. The one with my name and title embossed on it. The master key to the empire they dismissed as beneath them. In that moment, something hardened inside me. I had stayed silent for too long. Let them believe what they wanted. Let them treat me like less. But betrayal has a way of clarifying everything. Maybe it was time for a different kind of family vacation. When Friday arrived, I got there first. I used my private access road, the one Regina didn't even know existed. The staff greeted me with warmth and deference, as they always did, fully aware of who I truly was, but trained in discretion. Everything was prepared to my exact specifications. Fresh linens, stocked wine, security briefed. I changed into a simple sundress, nothing flashy, exactly the kind Regina would sneer at as cheap. And then I waited. They arrived in a convoy of luxury cars, as if pulling up to a red carpet. Regina led, of course, in her gleaming Mercedes SUV. Michael kissed me hello, though I could feel the strain in it. Behind them came Amanda and her husband Tom. And then the new addition, Jessica, the woman Regina wanted for Michael. She stepped out in a designer swimsuit that probably cost more than Regina thought I made in a month. "Sarah, dear," Regina cooed, her voice coated in that sticky, sweet falseness. "Help Maria with the luggage, won't you?" She gestured lazily toward their housekeeper, who was struggling with the designer bags. I smiled. "Actually, Maria can take the afternoon off. I've arranged for butler service for the house." Regina's eyes narrowed. "And who," she asked coldly, "is paying for that?" "Oh, don't worry," I said lightly. "It's taken care of." Her suspicion was almost comical, but she said nothing more. The afternoon unfolded according to Regina's script. Jessica was seated next to Michael at every opportunity, while I was consistently pushed to the far end of the group. My husband did nothing. His silence screamed louder than words. At dinner, Regina made her move. On the terrace, wineglass in hand, she looked at me with that smug smile. "Sarah, be a dear and check why the air conditioning isn't working properly in the East Wing." I set my glass down slowly. "I can call maintenance." "No, no," she interrupted. "You work in hospitality. Surely you know how to handle these little problems." "Jessica, why don't you tell Michael more about your father's new development project?" I felt my phone buzz. The nightly report from resort security. Slipping away, I opened it, and there it was. Footage of Regina and Amanda in the kitchen earlier, spiking my water glass with something. Liquid laxative. How original. I typed a quick message to my head of security. "Proceed with Protocol 17. When I returned, Regina was still holding court. "Really, Sarah," she drawled, eyeing my dress. "I don't know why you insist on wearing something from Target to dinner. We have standards here." "Right, Michael." My husband shifted but said nothing. Jessica smirked. "Speaking of standards," Regina continued, "I've been thinking this house really isn't big enough for everyone. Sarah, dear, perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the budget hotels in town. This is a family gathering after all." I looked at Michael, waiting, begging silently for him to say something to defend me, to remember I was his wife. But he didn't. He kept his eyes on his plate. And that was the final crack, the silence that broke everything. At that moment, the terrace doors opened. John, my head of security, stepped in with two officers. "Mrs. Chen," he said formally. "Is everything all right?" Regina snapped to her feet. "Who are you? How dare you interrupt our family dinner? Sarah, since you work here, deal with this immediately." I smiled, reaching into my purse. My fingers closed around the master keycard. I held it up the badge, catching the terrace lights. "Actually, Regina," I said softly, "I do need to deal with this. As owner and CEO of Sapphire Bay Resorts, I'm afraid I have to inform you that your reservation has been canceled." The silence was absolute. Michael's fork clattered against his plate. Regina whispered, "Owner." "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Owner of this resort. And the entire chain. 17 properties, in fact. And since you violated multiple terms of your rental agreement, attempting to poison another guest, for instance, I am exercising my right to terminate your stay." For the first time in years, I had their full attention. And it was only the beginning. Regina's face turned a shade I had never seen before, something between rage, disbelief, and the fear of losing control. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out, just a choking sound, as if the air itself had betrayed her. Amanda's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered across the tiles, and even Jessica, the shining jewel Regina had paraded in front of Michael, looked suddenly unsure of herself, shifting uncomfortably in her designer heels. "Michael," my husband just stared at me. His lips parted slightly, but no words followed. His silence was the same as it had always been: safe, passive, self-protective. And now it was deafening. I let the quiet stretch. Let the truth sink in like the tide rolling over a sandcastle. For years they had treated me like an afterthought, an inconvenience, an outsider. And all that time I had smiled, played along, endured their condescension, while they unknowingly stood in my house, drank my wine, slept in beds I had paid for, and walked beaches that belonged to me. Tonight their ignorance ended. "John," I said calmly to my head of security, "escort Mrs. Carlton and her guests to the lobby. Their belongings will be packed and delivered. Extend them every courtesy, but ensure they leave the premises immediately." Regina shrieked, finding her voice at last. "You can't do this! This is my family's vacation tradition." "No," I said, my tone measured, steady. "This is my property, my business, my life's work, and I will not be humiliated in my own house." Amanda's eyes widened. Your house?" "Yes," I answered. "Every villa, every suite, every stretch of sand, mine, and now you will leave." Jessica tried to laugh it off, her voice shrill. "This is absurd! You expect us to believe you own this entire resort?" I turned to her, my gaze cool. "Belief is irrelevant. The legal documents, the corporate registry, and the bank accounts all say the same thing. You've been parading around as if you were on Regina's stage, but all this time you've been standing in my theater. You were just too blinded by arrogance to notice." Regina lunged toward Michael. "Say something. Tell her she's out of line." This is our vacation, Michael. And here it was the moment. The choice. My husband caught between two worlds, the family who raised him and the wife who had built everything he lived in. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, searching for softness, for forgiveness, for the old Sarah who would bend just to keep the peace. But that Sarah was gone. Michael. I said, my voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear when they mocked me. You said nothing. When they belittled me, you stayed silent. When they plotted to replace me with Jessica, you let them. Do you have anything to say now? The silence after my words was a chasm. He lowered his eyes, and that was my answer. I turned back to John. Proceed. The officers moved forward, gentle but firm. Regina clutched her pearls, hissing threats about lawsuits, about shame, about how everyone would hear of this. I almost laughed. Let them hear. For once, the story would not be about Regina's superiority. It would be about her humiliation. As they were escorted out, Amanda muttered something under her breath, a final attempt to wound me. You'll regret this. No, I said softly. I regret letting it go on for so long. The doors closed behind them, and the terrace was quiet again. Just me, the sound of the waves in the distance, and the fragments of glass glittering on the ground like tiny pieces of the life I had just shattered. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not triumph, not yet. Something heavier. Something older. A grief that had been waiting for release. Because the truth was, Regina's cruelty had never been just about her words. It had dug into deeper wounds from a childhood of being underestimated, of being told I was not enough. My parents had been immigrants who worked themselves to exhaustion just to put food on the table. My mother used to whisper to me at night, "Sarah, don't let them make you feel small." But the world had been relentless in trying to do just that. So when Regina looked at me like I was less, it wasn't just her voice I heard. It was every voice that had ever doubted me, dismissed me, laughed at me. Tonight, for the first time, I had silenced them all. I sat back down at the table, the wine still half full, the food untouched. The stars above seemed brighter, clearer, as if the sky itself was watching. I let myself breathe. Let myself feel the ache of years of humiliation peeling away layer by layer. But victory is never clean. Inside, I was trembling. Not because I doubted what I had done, but because I knew what came next would not be simple. Michael was still my husband, and tonight had driven a wedge between us that might never be mended. His silence had spoken louder than betrayal. And the family I had just cast out, they were still bound to me by blood through him. Family drama doesn't end with one eviction. It festers, it spreads, it finds new cracks to pour itself into. And deep down I knew Regina would not forget this humiliation. She would plot, she would scheme, she would wait for her chance to strike again. But for the first time I wasn't afraid, because I had remembered who I was. Not just Sarah the wife, not just Sarah the daughter-in-law, but Sarah Chen, the woman who had built an empire from nothing, who had endured storms fiercer than Regina's sharp tongue, who had risen from dust and salt water and carved her name into the coastline. Tonight I had taken back my voice. And yet, as the waves crashed in the distance, I couldn't help but wonder what would be the cost of this victory. The following morning, I woke to the sound of gulls outside my window and the faint roar of the tide rolling in. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, the confrontation, the reveal, the look on Regina's face as security escorted her away. But then I saw my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand, dozens of missed calls and messages from Michael, and from Regina. I didn't open them right away. I padded across the cool tiles of the villa, poured myself a glass of water, and stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean. The horizon stretched wide, infinite, reminding me of all the years I had stood alone and clawed my way forward. The waves didn't care about Regina's fury or Michael's weakness. They had seen storms before. And so had I. Still, when I finally scrolled through the messages, my chest tightened. Regina's texts were venomous, alternating between threats of lawsuits and desperate appeals. You embarrassed this family in front of strangers. Michael will leave you for someone who knows her place. You'll regret crossing me. Michael's messages were worse. Sarah, please call me. You went too far last night. We could have handled this differently. They're my family. What did you expect me to do? That last one cut deepest. What did I expect him to do? defend me, stand beside me, love me. But I had learned the hard way that Michael's love came with conditions, with silence, when silence served him with loyalty that bent whichever way his mother demanded. I didn't reply. Instead, I dressed in a crisp white blouse and slacks and walked to the resort office. The staff greeted me with their usual deference, but I could sense their curiosity. News traveled fast, even without official channels. They had heard about last night, about the matriarch who had strutted through these halls for years, finally humbled. Mrs. Chen, my assistant murmured as I entered my office. We've already received several calls from Mrs. Carlton. She's demanding to speak with you directly. I sat down, folding my hands on the desk. Forward them to legal. No further engagement without counsel present. Yes, ma'am. But Regina was nothing if not persistent. By noon, she was at the resort gate screaming at the guards to let her in. I watched on the security feed as she raged, her pearls askew, her carefully coiffed hair frizzed in the sea air. She looked less like a queen and more like a desperate woman fighting to keep a crown that had already slipped from her head. She shouted about family, about rights, about how this had been her tradition for decades. And then, when the guards remained unmoved, her threats turned personal. Sarah is nothing. She's a fraud. My son married beneath him, and one day he'll realize it. You'll all see. I turned off the feed. Her voice no longer had power over me, but still her words lingered in my chest like old scars reopening. Married beneath him. Fraud. Not our caliber. They were the same words I had been hearing since the first day I met Regina, only louder now because she had lost control. And Michael. He wasn't at the gate with her, but I knew his silence was there all the same. That evening, he finally showed up at the villa. He didn't knock, he still had a key. I was on the terrace, sipping a glass of wine, watching the sun bleed into the horizon, when I heard the door open behind me. Sarah, he said softly. I turned, meeting his eyes. They were weary, shadowed, but not remorseful, never remorseful. You humiliated her, he said. She humiliated me for years. I replied, my voice steady. I endured it. I let it go. Until she tried to replace me in front of you and you said nothing. He flinched but didn't deny it. She's my mother, he murmured, and I'm your wife. The words hung heavy between us. He looked away first, always away. I didn't ask you to choose between us, I continued, but when you stayed silent, you chose anyway. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a man trapped. You don't understand, Sarah. My family. Your family, I interrupted. Or your mother. Because the rest of them followed her lead. Amanda laughed behind my back. Jessica sat at your side like she already belonged there. And you let them. You let them treat me like I was nothing. His jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he might finally shout, finally show some fire. But then his shoulders slumped. Maybe I didn't handle it right. But you could have told me. You didn't have to blindside me like that in front of everyone. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You think this was about blindsiding you? This was about survival, about dignity, about finally standing up after years of being trampled. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. And in that silence, I heard the truth: he would never be the partner I needed. Not when it meant standing up to her. Not when it meant risking the fragile peace he had always clung to. When he left that night, he didn't kiss me. He didn't even touch me. Just walked out the door, leaving the faint scent of his cologne behind like an echo of a man I no longer recognized. I stood on the terrace long after he was gone, the night air cool against my skin. My victory over Regina should have felt sweet, triumphant. And on some level it did. But beneath it was something heavier. Grief. Not just for the marriage unraveling before my eyes, but for the years I had wasted trying to belong to a family that never wanted me. As the waves crashed below, I realized Regina's poison had worked, not by replacing me with Jessica, not by stripping away my dignity, but by showing me that Michael's love was never strong enough to shield me. She had taken the one thing I had still believed in and revealed it for what it was: fragile, conditional, hollow. And that betrayal cut deeper than anything else. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of half-truths, whispers, and the sharp sting of silence. Guests continued to arrive at the resort, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within its walls. To them, Sapphire Bay was paradise champagne, At sunset, laughter spilling across the pool deck, waves crashing like applause. But beneath the polished veneer, my family, if I could still call them that, was unraveling. Regina did not leave quietly. Of course she didn't. She rented a villa down the coast, and from there she waged her war. She called anyone who would listen, the country club, the local society pages, even a few investors she somehow had connections to. She painted me as a fraud, an opportunist, a liar who had trapped her son into a marriage to gain status. The irony would have been laughable if it hadn't been so exhausting. I had more status, more wealth, more power than she could ever dream of. Yet the smear campaign wasn't about truth. It was about perception. Regina was a master at planting seeds of doubt, and she knew how to water them with venom until they took root. And Michael, he visited me less and less. When he did, his words were clipped, his eyes evasive. He spoke of damage control, of keeping the peace, of how maybe I could have handled things with more grace. More grace. That phrase became a splinter in my chest. Wasn't it grace that had kept me silent for years while they belittled me? Wasn't it grace that had allowed Regina to believe she was hosting her grand beach vacations, when all along she had been renting from me? Wasn't it grace that kept me from shouting the truth the first time I heard her plotting to replace me with another woman? Grace had been my prison. Now for the first time I was free. One evening as I was reviewing financials in my office, my assistant rushed in pale and nervous. "Mrs. Chen, she's here again." I didn't have to ask who. Regina had stormed back onto the property, somehow slipping past security this time. By the time I reached the lobby, she was already in the middle of it, her voice carrying like a hurricane through the vaulted ceilings. Guests whispered and stared as she pointed at me with a trembling hand. "She's a fraud," Regina screamed. "She doesn't deserve any of this. My son deserves better than a woman who lies about who she is." I stopped a few feet away from her, calm, steady. "Regina," I said evenly, "you are trespassing. You think you can erase me," she hissed. "This is my family, my legacy, not yours." Her words echoed through the marble lobby, bouncing against the polished glass, shattering whatever illusion of dignity she still clung to. I saw the pity in the eyes of the guests, watching the embarrassment of staff who had endured her arrogance for years. But before I could speak again, Michael appeared. He stepped between us, his hand raised like a man trying to calm a storm. His eyes darted from her to me, desperate pleading. "Mom, please," he said, "this isn't the way." Then he turned to me. "Sarah, just let her stay, for appearances, for the family. We can fix this quietly." I stared at him, my heart pounding. Of all the choices he could have made, he still chose her. Not openly, not loudly, but in the way he always did, through silence, through compromise, through the refusal to stand beside me when it mattered most. I felt something inside me snap. "You still don't get it," I whispered, my voice trembling, not with weakness, but with fury. "This isn't about appearances. This isn't about family vacations or polite society. This is about respect, about dignity, about me refusing to be erased by you, or by her, or by anyone else ever again." Michael flinched, and the venom in my tone. Regina smirked, believing for a fleeting second that she had won, that she had forced me to break. But then I stepped closer, my voice steady, carrying through the lobby so that every guest, every staff member, every pair of eyes would hear. "For years you all treated me like I was nothing," I said. "But it was me who built this. Me who signed the checks. Me who turned broken down properties into the empire you've been enjoying all along. And you?" I looked at Michael. "You let them treat me like less than nothing. Do you have any idea what that does to a person? To give everything and still be invisible?" His lips parted, but no sound came. He looked at me the same way he always did, helpless, small, weak. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't just fighting Regina. I was fighting Michael too, fighting his silence, fighting his cowardice, fighting the version of myself that had believed his silence was love. I straightened my shoulders. "Regina, you are hereby permanently banned from all Sapphire Bay properties. If you set foot on my resorts again, you will be removed by law enforcement." Gasps rippled through the lobby. Regina sputtered, rage twisting her features. "You can't. I can. I cut her off, and I just did." I turned to the head of security. "Escort her out." The guards moved forward. Regina shrieked, clawing at Michael's arm, demanding he do something, anything. But for once, even he stayed silent. And I realized I no longer cared. As the doors slammed shut behind her, I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in years. Not just relief, not just vindication, power, pure unshakable power. But beneath it, a hollow ache spread through me. Because power could not fill the cracks in my marriage. It could not silence the memory of my mother's whispered words, "Don't let them make you feel small." It could not give me back the years I had wasted trying to belong to a family that would never accept me. That night, I walked the beach alone, the sand cool beneath my feet, the ocean whispering like an old friend. I thought about Regina's twisted face, about Michael's silence, about the girl I used to be before all of this, the girl who still believed love could conquer anything. And I knew the final confrontation was still to come, not with Regina, not even with Michael, but with myself, with the part of me that still longed for their approval, their love, their acceptance. Because until I faced that, revenge would never feel like victory. The ocean has always been my confessional. When I was a child, I would stand on the shore after a day of being mocked at school for wearing secondhand clothes, whispering my fears into the waves. They always carried them away, smoothing the ache in my chest. As an adult, the ocean became my reminder of perspective, vast, endless, never concerned with the petty games of men and women who believed themselves mighty. So when Michael came to find me that night, I was not surprised. I heard his footsteps in the sand long before he spoke. I didn't turn right away. I let him walk the last few steps toward me, his shadow stretching beside mine under the moonlight. "Sarah," he said softly, as if my name were fragile. I finally turned to him, the salt air stinging my eyes. His face looked older than it had just a week ago, as if the weight of his mother's downfall had pressed years onto him. But still there was that familiar weakness, the pleading look I had known for too long. "You didn't have to do this," he murmured. "You didn't have to humiliate her, or me." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Didn't I? After years of humiliation, after years of silence, after watching you sit back while she dismantled me piece by piece. Yes, Michael, I had to. Because if I didn't, I would have lost myself entirely." He swallowed hard, his gaze dropping. "She's my mother. I can't just cut her out. And I'm your wife," I countered, the words sharp, jagged. "But when you had to choose not between us, but between right and wrong, you stayed silent. Again and again. Do you have any idea how lonely it is to fight battles your partner refuses to even acknowledge?" He reached for me, his hand trembling. "I love you." I stepped back, the sand shifting beneath my feet. "No, Michael. You love the idea of me. The version of me who smiles quietly while you keep the peace. But you don't love me enough to stand up for me. And that's not love, that's convenience." The words hung in the air between us, heavier than the tide. He dropped his hand slowly, as if realizing for the first time that I was no longer within reach. I turned my gaze back to the horizon, the moon casting a silver path across the waves. "I built all of this," I whispered, half to him, half to myself. "The resorts, the empire, the life we live. And yet in your mother's eyes, and maybe even in yours, I was always less, always invisible. Do you know what that does to a person, to be erased in the very life they created?" He said nothing. His silence was the answer I had known all along. Finally, I looked at him, steady, unflinching. "I don't need you to protect me anymore, Michael. I never did. I only needed you to believe in me, but since you couldn't, I'll believe in myself." There was no shouting, no dramatic end, just silence broken only by the waves. He nodded once, as if conceding defeat, then turned and walked back up the beach, his figure shrinking with every step until the darkness swallowed him. I stood there until the tide lapped at my ankles, until the cool water grounded me. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Not because I had defeated Regina, or because I had finally claimed my place, but because I had chosen myself. The following weeks were quiet, almost eerily so. Regina disappeared from the resort scene, too humiliated to show her face. Amanda stopped calling. Jessica, with her smug smiles, vanished as quickly as she had appeared. And Michael, well, Michael faded too. Our conversations became polite, distant, like strangers forced to share space. The marriage had been broken long before that night in the lobby. I had only finally acknowledged it. But in the stillness that followed, I discovered something unexpected: peace. I threw myself into my work, not as an escape, but as a declaration. I expanded the resorts, introduced new programs for women entrepreneurs in hospitality, created scholarships for young girls who wanted to study business but couldn't afford it. For every sneer Regina had thrown at me, for every time Michael had stayed silent, I carved something beautiful out of the pain. Because betrayal doesn't have to destroy you, it can shape you, it can sharpen you, it can remind you of who you are when the world insists on erasing you. And that became my lesson, the one I now share with you. If you have ever been dismissed, belittled, betrayed by the very people who should have loved you, know this: their silence, their cruelty, their arrogance does not define you. It defines them. You are not small because they cannot see you. You are not invisible because they choose not to look. I let Regina think she owned the stage, and in doing so, I almost lost myself. But when I finally took back my voice, when I finally refused to be silent, I discovered something far more powerful than revenge. I discovered freedom. So here I am telling you my story. Not to gloat, not to reopen wounds, but to remind you that you have the right to stand tall. You have the right to demand respect. You have the right to walk away from those who will never give it. And if you are sitting there now listening to me, feeling the sting of your own betrayal, I want you to remember this. Scars are not proof that you are broken. Scars are proof that you survived. If my story has touched you, if you've ever felt the weight of betrayal or the silence of someone who should have stood beside you, I ask you to share it. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment with your own story, because your voice matters, and together we can make sure no one ever feels invisible again. Because the greatest revenge is not destroying those who tried to break you. The greatest revenge is living so fully, so undeniably that their attempts become meaningless. And that is what I chose.